Okay, so we're beginning siman lamid, which has all the, not all, but many of the cases where somebody is patur from putting on tefillin. Okay, and let's maybe start off with the source pages. So the first halacha is about somebody who has a choli me'ayin. Okay, some sort of sickness in the bowels, which we'll see why that exempts him from tefillin. So the source for this is a Gemara in Chulin Daf Kuf Yud. It's an interesting context there. The context there is one of the Amoraim who came to another place, and another Amora saw him there, and he was like doing everything wrong. You know, he was eating isurim, he was not wearing tefillin, not wearing tzitzit, all kinds of stuff. Uh, so he was grilling him on everything, and for everything, of course, he had an answer as to why he was doing it. So one of the things was, Chazia de lo hava manach tefillin, so he thought I wasn't putting on tefillin. Amar li my time lo menach tefillin. Amar li choli me'ayin hu, ve'amar Rav Yehuda choli me'ayin patur min tefillin. Okay, so if you're sick in the bowels, then you're exempt from tefillin. Now, why exactly are you exempt? So there seems to be a slight difference between Rashi and Tosfot on this. I'm not sure. You can maybe say there's the same thing, but Rashi says here in Chulin, patur min tefillin mipnei shetzarich lecholtzan tadir. In other words, each time that you'll need to relieve yourself or you'll have gas or whatever it is, you'll have to take off the tefillin. So in such a situation where you'll keep having to remove the tefillin, then you're not mechuyev to put them on. Okay, why do I say from Tosfot it sounds differently? Because we have another Gemara. This is also a fascinating Gemara in Ktuvot Daf Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. It's really worthwhile to see the entire Gemara there. Not because of Ilchot Tefillin, just onto its own, because there the Gemara has the whole story of the day that Rebbe passed away, and the background there is that the Talmidim declared that anybody who will say that Rebbe has died, he daker b'cherev, he will be stabbed with a sword, and they were praying, and their prayers essentially prevented at least delayed a bit for Rebbe from passing away. So the Gemara there says, "Ahu yoma de dach nafshei de Rebbe, gazu rabanan ta'anita u'barach." So they declared a fast day and they were praying. V'amri kol man de'amar nach nafshei de Rebbe daker b'cherev. Whoever says that Rebbe passed away, they will be stabbed. Tzadik amte de Rebbe le'igra. So the lady who was serving in the house of Rebbe, she went up to the I guess the upper floor where Rebbe was. Amra עליונים מבקשים את רבי, והתחתונים מבקשים את רבי. יהי רצון שיקופו תחתונים את העליונים. He was saying both in the heavens they want Rebbe, but also here on earth they want Rebbe. So let's hope those on earth will overcome those powers above. כיוון דחזאי כמה זימנין דאי לבית הכיסא, when she saw how many times he was having to go to the bathroom, and each time he was taking off his tefillin, putting on his tefillin, and he had a lot of tsar from this. So he said it's time for him to go, and the Elyonim should overpower the Tachtonim and take Rebbe's soul back to the heavens. The problem was all the Chachamim, they were not stopping from prayer on behalf of Rebbe, and as long as they were praying, the Elyonim could not take Rebbe. Shakla Kuzia, Shadia Mi'igra Le'ara, Ishteku Berachme V'nach Nafshi Derebi. So she took some sort of kli, she threw it from the roof to the ground, so it shattered. Everybody was startled by the noise, so they very abruptly stopped for a moment from their prayers, and at that moment, Rebbe was taken. So anyway, there's a whole continuation there in the Gemara, but the story is very interesting. Anyway, so what was happening with Rebbe, with the tefillin here? So Rashi here says, the Arka Mazimni Lebeit HaKiseh, the Choli Me'ayim Havalei. So Rashi says he had a Choli Me'ayim. Chalatz tefillin u'menachlu v'kamitzar l'chlotzu le'aniach. Okay, and he had tsar because he kept having to remove the tefillin. Now the Chora, if he had a Choli Me'ayim, he should not have been wearing tefillin, right? We said Choli Me'ayim is patur min tefillin. So Tosfot here says, ואף על גב שחולי מעיים פטורים מן התפילין, לפי שאין יכולים להיזהר היטב, אבל רבי היה מנהיג עצמו בקדושה יותר מדי, והיה יודע היטב להיזהר. So, from Tosfot, it's mashmas as follows, that the reason the Choli Me'ayim is patur from the tefillin is Ein Yecholi Lizaher Hitev. It sounds like from Tosfot that they won't be able to be careful to remove the tefillin on time whenever they need it. Rebbe Haya Yoda Lizaher Hitev. In other words, Rebbe knows that he would be able to remove the tefillin in time. So it sounds a bit from Tosfot slightly different than Rashi, that the reason Choli Mayim is patur is not because you always have to remove the tefillin. If you'll always manage to remove the tefillin on time before you need to relieve yourself, then fine. Then you can do it. And that's when then you can put on the tefillin, and that's what Rebbe did. However, the reason Choli Mayim is patur for tefillin is because a normal person won't be able, if he's got such a sickness in the bowels, he won't be able to remove the tefillin on time before he relieves himself or whatever it is. You could say there isn't necessarily a machloket. You could say that even if somebody is able to remove the tefillin on time, it's so much of a trouble, like we see from Rebbe, that in itself should patter him. And Rebbe was sort of machmir on himself. So I'm not so sure, and we'll see there are Rishonim that will say that. So I'm not so sure there actually is a machloket here between Tosfot and Rashi, but it could be that there's somewhere of a machloket. It's clear, though, from Tosfot, if somebody who's not able to remove it in time, he has no business putting on tefillin, right? The only justification for Rebbe to put on tefillin is because he was going to remove it on time. But if somebody's not even going to be able to do that, then he should not be putting on the tefillin. Okay. Now, in this source, we only have Choli Me'ayim. There is an Ozarua, which speaks about Chole being in general patur from the tefillin. And he says as follows, he says, Chole patur min tefillin. So he says in general, a Chole is patur from the tefillin. What is his source for this? אמרינא בירושלמי, פרק כמה דברכות, פרק ב' דברכות, ומדרש יונה בדיינו, פרק אני פי מלך שמו, רבי ינאי הלובש אחר חוליו 3 ימים. כלומר שהחולי ממרק, שנאמר סולח לכל עוונייך ואופה לכל תחלואייך. So you see that Rabbi Yana, he was not wearing the tefillin when he was sick. He only put on the tefillin after 3 days. Okay, after 3 days, he had, I guess, apparently gotten better. That's when he put it on. Rabbi Yochanan bן זכאי לא הווה זין תפילין מיני לא בקיץ ולא בסיטבא, כך נהג רבי אליעזר תלמידו אחריו, so he had the tefillin on all the time during the winter and the summer. רבי יוחנן בסיטבא חזיק רישא ולאו השתרוויו. ובקיץ לביש דאדרי הלמדת שהחולה פטור מן התפילין. So Rabbi Yochanan, in the summer, he only wore the tefillin shel yad. Okay, why? Because apparently he was sick, so he was not able to wear tefillin. Or he had some sort of pain from it. והיית פרק הנושא דבר השקפת דרבי דאמר סליק עמתא לאיגרא, אמרה עליונים מבקשים את רבי ותחתונים מבקשים את רבי, יהי רצון שכופו תחתונים את העליונים. כיוון דחזי דאר כמה זימנים לבית הכיסא ומנח תפילין וכמצר, מה יהי רצון שיקופו את העליונים התחתונים. So you saw that he put on tefillin even when he was sick. שאני רבי, שהיה מתנהג יותר מדי בקדושה וטהרה, והיה מחמיר על עצמו כמו רבי אליעזר נמי שלבש תפילין בכל יום שמת פה סמוך ליטתו. ידיד הסוף פרק המיטות שהיה מחמיר על עצמו מן השם קדושה וטהרה. So the other says in general, Choli is patur from tefillin. Rebbe was machmir on himself. But it sounds like from the words of Ruah that it's not just Choli Me'ayim, it's a more general tour. Beit Yosef asks, how can this be? We see in the Gemara that it's only Choli Me'ayim. So he says here, כתב המרדכי, שחולה פטור מן התפילין והביא ראיה לדבר. Essentially, the Mordechai is just a brief quote of the Or Zarua. And he says, ותימה אם כן המאי נקט רבי יהודה חולה מאין, ואם הסתם חולה. ומצאתי לרמב"ם, this is a Rambam that we'll see later on, מצטער ומי שאין דעתו מיושבת פטור, שהמניח אסור להסיח דעתו מהם. In other words, the Rambam has a chiddush that generally somebody who's mitzta'er, and he's not able to concentrate, okay, he's patur from putting on tefillin. Why? Because he will be, when you have tefillin on, you're not allowed to be meisich da from the tefillin. So according to the Rambam, there's like a general tour for anybody who's mitzvah and is unable to focus. So he says, ולפי זה אפשר לפתור כל חולי ומצטער. ורב יהודה לנקת חולה מעיים אפילו בינו מצטער. In other words, according to Beit Yosef as follows. חולי מעיים, the tour is, because he's not able to control himself, he'll have to constantly relieve himself. So it's not a question of meisichta, it's more a question of not being able to keep a clean body. Other cholim that don't have that issue with the bowels, then for them, it all depends is how much of a disturbance is the choli is. If the choli is just a little bit of an inconvenience, or at least in terms of the feeling, but he is able to focus, then he should put on feeling. If the choli is more difficult and it causes him inability to put on, then he's patur. Okay, to me from the Orach Chaim, it sounded a bit like more of David, like what you were saying, that they had some sort of pain from putting on that feeling. Yeah, here the Dark Moshe quotes it more before. See the Shulchan Aruch. So the Mechaber here says, Chole ma'ayim patur min tefillin, so he just brings the Gemara and Chulin. The Ramah here adds what the Beit Yosef said. He said, Daga afilu ein lo tzar, אבל שאר החולה, אם מצטער בחוליו ואין דעתו, מיושב עליו פטור ואם לאו חייב. So he says what the Beit Yosef said, that other choli, it all depends if he has tsar and he's unable to concentrate, he's patur, otherwise he is chayiv. Here the Mishnah Berurah says, choli me'ayin v'hu adin mi sheshata mashke ha'meshalshel. If somebody drank something which causes him constantly, to have some sort of diarrhea, so he's patur mishum de tefillin bayu guf naki. And here he says mitfilin. He says mi shebitel mitzvat tefillin machmat choli v'avru alav lamed yom shelo nicham shechozer umenicham ein tzarich levarech shechiyan. In other words, even if you haven't put on tefillin for 30 days because of this choli, when you put them on again, you do not need to say a bracha of shechiyan. Why not? Even though we do say a bracha of shechiyan on mitzvot that we haven't done for a long time, okay? Like for example, when we blow shofar, we put on tefillin, we read the Megillah, right? All these mitzvot, we do say shechiyanu. The difference is as follows, because those are mitzvot that are only from time to time. So mitzvot that their chiyuv is only from time to time, then Chazal were mitaken a shechiyanu. Okay, but tefillin basically the chiyuv is every day. You were exempt because you had a choli, but the mitzvah was there the entire time. You were unable to fulfill the mitzvah. So it's not like even if for a while you were unable to keep the mitzvah chazal, we're not talking in this situation a shechiyanu because it's not a new mitzvah. This mitzvah was incumbent upon you all throughout. You just were unable to do it. I did see an interesting discussion regarding when a child first puts on tefillin, maybe he should say shechiyan. So I saw
not obligated yet. He's not bar mitzvah. He's not bar mitzvah.
So maybe on okay, all right. So maybe on the first day of his bar mitzvah, he should say shechiyanu. So it's not so clear. Some advise maybe if you want to say a shechiyanu, then to have some sort of new clothing as well. I saw something in the name of Reb Shalom Zalman Auerbach. To me, it sounds a bit strange, but to do it. But I saw somebody writing in the name of Reb Shalom Zalman Auerbach that he says that the katan, when he puts on tefillin, the father should not yet give him the tefillin. Okay, only on the day of his bar mitzvah, the father should be makne the tefillin to the son, and then he can say on it shechiyanu, just like you would say, when you acquire a new article of clothing. I don't know. I haven't seen that. I don't remember seeing anybody do that, but maybe. Yeah, like we said, this is what the Mishnah Berurah here quotes, the source for this. I think it's a tshuva of the Chavot Yair, is what we said. Yeah, here he says, here you can see in the Shali Tshuva, עיין בחוות יאיר שכתב, אפילו לא הניח תפילין מעולם, אין לברך שהחיינו כיוון דרגילה ותדירה. In other words, it's a Chazal were not mitaking on tefillin shechianu because it's something which is supposed to be all the time. It's not something which comes from time to time.
I mean, the same is like as bar mitzvah boy doesn't say shechianu on any other mitzvah that is doing for the first time officially.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's bar mitzvah, so he's now in the flow.
Saying Kiddush on Friday night. It's not saying the shechianu.
Right. You're right. Any mitzvah that he starts tzitzit, whatever it is, we don't find a shechianu on any of that because I think those are mitzvot that are fundamentally day to day. So you're right. The katan he was exempt because you could say it's sort of like a chodesh. He had his exemption, because he didn't have that yet. But the nature of the mitzvah itself, because it's a mitzvah that is sort of all the time, then there's no shechianu on such a mitzvah. Mitzvot that are by definition from time to time, so the mitzvah now has arrived. Now the shofar, it's something new. So we say shechianu hikimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh because it's dependent on, on the zaman. I think that's the svara.
No.
Tzal. He says, אפילו אם הולך בשווקים וברחובות פטור. ואסור לו להסביר על עצמו בזה, אלא בשעה קריאת שמע בתפילה, אם יודע שיוכל להעמיד את עצמו בגוף נקי, וכמו שכתב לקמן ציון כבד. In other words, somebody, again, with the חולה מעיים, even if he doesn't have tzar, and even if he's somebody that he's functioning, it's not like he's home all day, he's going out, and he's going out to the streets, nevertheless, he's not allowed to be machmir himself unless the only time we'll see that he should be trying to be machmir is if he's able to control himself at least for kriyat shema and shmoneh esrei, then to put on tefillin just for that. Somebody who has tzar, though, right? So we said sh'al cholei mitztaer b'cholio ve'en dato miyoshevet alav patur, right? So here the patur is not because he's not able to control his dad, but rather because he's going to be meisich dad. So here the Mishnah Berurah says, "Shema mitoch hatzar yasich dato mem, v'im rotzo lachmir al atzmo rashai." So in this case, you are able to be machmir upon yourself. Why? Because you have a guf naki. The problem is that you're not going to be meisich dad. So on this, if you want to be machmir, it's not disrespectful so much to the tefillin. So you are allowed to be machmir upon yourself. I think generally people usually do put on tefillin. If it's other types of choli, not choli man. מי שליבו ערום, ראינו שהולך במכנסיים לבד ולמעלו ערום, ואין בכלל זה מה שבית הצוואר בטוח, לא יניח תפילין, דאף דלברך רשאי, כיוון שערבתו מכוסה, אפילו הכי אין נכון שיהיה מגולה וליבו יניח תפילין. So if he doesn't have a shirt on, even if he has pants on, he says you should not put on tefillin. Let's see seif bet. מי שבריא לו, שאינו יכול להתפלל בלא הפכה, מותר שיעבור זמן התפילה ממה שיתפלל בלא גוף נקי. ואם יראה לו שיוכל להעמיד עצמו בגוף נקי בשעת קריאת שמע, יניח תפילין בין אהבה לקריאת שמע ויברך. Okay, the source for this, the Beit Yosef brings from a tshuva of the Rosh, and basically he says as follows: somebody was clear to him that he would not be able to daven without gas coming out. It's better that he not daven rather than try the davening without a clean body. However, if he is able, just for briefly for saying Kriyat Shema to do so, then because soon we'll see in the Mishnah Berurah why there's a difference between Tefillah and Kriyat Shema, then he can put on tefillin just between, in other words, after he finishes saying Ahava Rabbah, he should then put on tefillin and make the bracha even. It's not considered the hefsek, right? Because he has no other choice. And just to have the tefillin on for Kriyat Shema. Again, the importance of having tefillin on for the Kriyat Shema is that if you say Kriyat Shema without tefillin, it's like you're it may either do checker batzmo, that you're testifying against yourself, that you're saying and you don't have tefillin on. So that's why, even if you're anus, then what can you do? But that's why you should make an effort for that. Okay, he says, only somebody who definitely knows that he's going to have gas, even if you're concerned that you might have, that's not a reason not to daven. He says, דווקא תפילה, משום דהו כעומד לפני המלך, וגנאי הוא לעמוד להתפלל לדעת שיפסוק באמצע עד שיכלה ריח, אבל קריאת שמע וברכותיה מותר אך בלי תפילין. In other words, normally you could say if somebody has gas, so you relieve yourself, you wait until the smell passes, and then you continue. But in tefillah, because Shmoneh Esrei is omed lifnei hamelech, you're standing before the king, that's disrespectful to do that if you know that you're going to have gas. Then you are allowed to say, but of course not with tefillin. Okay, that's what he says. For tefillin, just put it on just for the Kriyat Shema itself. ויברך ויקרא בין שמע ואחר כך לרבצן, ואם יודע שאין יכול לעצמו עצמו להפיח אלא בכדי שיוכל לחלוץ של ראש, אפילו הכי מותר להליך לכתחילה את שניהם, כן כתב המגן הרם, בפרק מדהים מפק בלדי. In other words, let's say I won't be able to remove both the tefillin shel rosh and tefillin shel yad time. I'll just be able to get the shel rosh out. He says that's also fine because the ikar peda, again, if you'll have gas, is dafka on the shel rosh. Okay. Let's see the next halacha. So the Torah says Nashim ve'avadim pturim. Women and slaves are patur. Here the Beit Yosef brings the source Mishnah beperek Misha Mito v'yayiv taima bagmara mishum dehave mitzvat aseh she'azman grama. B'chol mitzvat aseh she'azman grama nashim pturot and avadim have the same mitzvot as women. וכתב הראש בהלכות תפילין ואף על גב דקאי מלן כרבי עקיבא דאמר לילה זמן תפילין מכל מקום שבת ויום טוב לאו זמן תפילין. Okay, this is always the question, is tefillin really a mitzvah aseh she'azman grama? Because it depends on the question, Laila Zman Tefillin or not. So the Rosh says we paskin Laila Zman Tefillin. I think the Rambam paskins Laila Lav Zman Tefillin. However, the Rosh says even according to that, Shabbat and Yom Tov Lav Zman Tefillin. So therefore, that makes it Tefillin Mitzvah Aseh She'azman Grama because it only applies on weekdays, not on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Now the famous question: are women permitted to put on tefillin if they want to? Okay, as we know, heavily debated. Let's see at least the sources that we have here on this. כתב הכל בו בשם הרם שאם רצו לאנשים להניח תפילין אין שומעים להן מפני שאינם יודעים לשמור עצמן בנקיות. So he says in the name of the Maharam that even if the women want to put on tefillin, and we know generally that if they want to, they are able to fulfill mitzvot aseh she'azman grama, like they do by shofar, lulav, sukkah, and many other mitzvot. He says by tefillin not. Why? Because einan yodon lishmor atzman benekiyut. Apparently he's talking about all kinds of, I'm guessing he's talking about maybe all kinds of blood stains that women may have or those kind of things. ובספר אורחות חיים מקשה עליו מדאמרינא דריש פרק המוצא תפילין למיכל בת כושי הייתה מנחת תפילין ולא Michu Chachamim. So as we know, the Gemara says that famously, Michal, the daughter of Shaul, used to put on tefillin. ולי נראה שטעם הר"ם, כמו שכתבו התוספות, דאיתי פסיקתא, שמיחו בחכמים ופרשו הם דתיימה משום תפילין, צריכים גוף נקי ונשים אינם זרזות להיזהר, והר"ם רצה לחוש לדברי הפסיקתא. In other words, there's a מחלוקת in Chazal whether חכמים rebuked מיכל בת שאול or did not rebuke, and the Maharam is following the Medrash that they did rebuke. In other words, they did not approve of her putting on tefillin. See here in the Mishnah Berurah as well. So the Mechaber says, Nashim ve'avadim pturim min ha-tefillin mipnei shu mitzvat aseh she'azman grama. Agas says the Rama, ve'im anashim rotzim lachmir al atzman mochin beyadan. In other words, we should prevent them from, we should tell them not to put on tefillin. Okay, here he says in the Mishnah Berurah, he says, "V'tumtum v'androginos chayavin b'tefillin misafek." Okay, fine. She'azman grama da'shabbat v'yom tov lav zman tefillin. Here, there's a machloket regarding avadim, whether avadim, if they want to put on tefillin, whether we also say by them also that they're not going to be careful about the guf naki. And here he says also, מוחין בידן, מפני שצריכים גוף נקי ונשים אין זריזות להיזהר. Okay, so that's at least the reason that's given here in the postscript. Let's try and see quickly the last seif, not the last seif, but the next seif. Next seif is an interesting thing. The Beit Yosef here brings a kolbo, another kolbo in the name of the Ram. He says, "Arabachurim asher sha'alta asher meharim efilu b'shat kriat shema lo yanichu tefillin." So he quotes from the name of the Ram, incredible halacha. He says, young men who are unable to control their thoughts and they're always mehar here, about women, about Avera, and their mind leads to that, they're patur from tefillin. He says that they should not put on tefillin. Okay, the Beit Yosef doesn't like this at all. He goes back and forth. He says, at the end, אין לפוטרם מצוות תפילין מפני כך, אלא יש לקופם בדברים ולמשוך ליבם ליראת שמיים, כדי שיסיחו ליבם מדברי הווי, ומזיקים לגוף ולנפש, ויפנו ליבם לקבל עליהם על מלכות שמיים. I think he's saying, if they have this problem, adarabah, that's not a reason to exempt them from tefillin. That's a reason to, to try to get them to have more yirat shamayim, to have their minds focusing on the right things and not on these things. In the Shulchan Aruch, what does he say on this? He just says, so he says, he doesn't say you're exempt. He's just saying when you put on tefillin, that you make sure your mind, be strong that your mind won't go into that direction. The Ramado says, the Ramado says, like the Korbon, the name of the Ram, that if that's really a situation that you're completely unable to control yourself, you should not put on tefillin. Here the Mishnah Berurah explains you need also guf nakimi machshava ra'ah. Again, the Mishnah Berurah also, like the Beit Yosef, doesn't like what the Rama says so much. He says, "Mikol makom yireh b'chol hayicholet lakuf et atzmo v'nimshoch halev lirat shamayim k'dei להסיח הדעת מדברי הווי ומזיקים לגוף ולנפש ולפנות הלב לקבל עליו כל מלכות שמיים בקדושה." So really, that's really the instruction that we should tell young men. At least to try to focus, at least for a minimal amount of time, when they're putting on tefillin, to control their thoughts that they won't head in those directions.
So basically, stadlos.
What?
So basically, stadlos.
Yeah, hishtadlus. Again, maybe like the Rama says, if somebody, I don't know, is in such a crazy situation, so maybe he should limit the amount of time that he puts on tefillin or something. But I don't know. But generally, the direction should be like the Beit Yosef said, make the ishtadlus, at least when the tefillin are on, to keep your thoughts focused on kedusha.